Let me just touch a bit first on the growth that we've been talking just now. Kristalina mentioned it. I think the Minister Al-Jada also mentioned it. For policymakers, it's actually very difficult to strike a balance between quantity growth and quality growth, right? And for us, we need to ensure that growth is sustainable, growth is inclusive, growth is equitable, and also growth is resilient. And because all these factors will ensure there will be global prosperity and global stability, and we touched on that, right? So for the region, for Southeast Asia, if you look at Southeast Asia, it has been a net beneficiary in the last couple of years. In fact, the last 4 years, you've seen FDI doubling because of the flows. I mean, why? Perhaps it started with COVID. There was concern about supply chain resiliency, supply chain security, and then there's issue where you just mentioned about China, the strategy of companies, strategies of industries, where there's the China plus one, and we've seen that as well. And ASEAN being very neutral in many of its position, has been attractive for many institutions and companies to relook at strengthening their supply chain. Right? So for ASEAN, it's just to give you a perspective of ASEAN, and Malaysia, of course, is one of them. Growth has been around 4 to 5%, and it's expected to continue that trend, and that is really the fastest growing bloc. We are the 5th largest economic bloc, population of 680 million people, GDP of $3.7 trillion US dollars. And we, as a member of ASEAN, also recognize the importance of the growth to be inclusive. Right? So one growth of one ASEAN nation should not be at the expense of another. And how do we do this? I mean, of course, I think IMF recently just talked about the growth in global trade. This year, trade is expected to grow stronger than last year. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, 3.3% this year. Last year was around 0.3%. In fact, the lowest in 50 years. And ASEAN, as a group of nations, look at their trade to GDP is all above 100%. I mean, Malaysia is, of course, open economy, Singapore, etc. So we are in the right position to leverage and, well, opportunistic in a way, to ensure that we ride on this. So back to the question with China, right? China is ASEAN's largest trading partner. In fact, it is Malaysia's largest trading partner for the last 15 years. Just to give you a figure, Malaysia, China, total trade with Malaysia, China is about 17% of Malaysia's total trade. It's an important part of ASEAN as well. And if we look at intra-ASEAN, which is again important because as economies within ASEAN integrate better, deepen further, that will bring stability as well. So unfortunately for ASEAN, intra-trade within ASEAN is around 22-23%. So there's room for improvement. Of course, there's a lot of multilateral agreements being signed, I think, and then ASEAN has also engaged GCC last year for the first time, and we're going to continue to engage GCC. In fact, we have a forum after this, GCC ASEAN, and again, we have seen also big flows from Europe and US. And for us, we need to ensure, because when I talk about quality and quantity just now, what we're seeing is that quantity of growth, I mentioned 4 to 5%. Malaysia last year was around 3.7%. This region is around 4 to 5%, but is that growth even, right, within the nations and within industries? So when we look as policymakers, we have our plans, but again, like Mr. Al-Jada said, it's all about implementation, it's about execution. So let's look at industries that around ASEAN. We need to ensure that they move to the next level. How do they do that? They need to increase the complexity, economic complexity of their industries, economic complexity of their economy, which will then lead to increase in wages, increase in household income, and therefore, in a way, will bring much more stability as well. Right? So, because sometimes your GDP is 4 to 5%, but then when you go down on the ground, without any policymaker intervention, there will be uneven growth across countries and across sectors. So we need to settle that one. The other one, I think you mentioned about technology, innovation, that's going to be key for the region as well, because to ensure that, from a perspective of Minister of Trade, not only physical infrastructure is important, but also digital infrastructure. Again, some countries are in a stronger fiscal position, and as you mentioned, we were also affected by COVID, given the fiscal space at that time was utilized quite fully, in fact, by some nations. You see the debt to GDP of many countries has gone up quite considerably, but growth is going to be key to alleviate, to mitigate that impact. So to me, we need to ensure the economies continue to grow, that the growth definitely must be more even, sustainable, and finally, like it or not, the region also needs to ensure that to achieve sustainability, you need to also embrace the green economy. So this is where ASEAN, again, are investing a lot in this, and with China and with Europe, with US, I mean, if you look at China and US, it's already nearly half of the world's GDP, right? Yep. So ASEAN will have to work closely with both powers, and of course Europe and the rest of the world as well.